This podcast is brought to you by PLI, the Practicing Law Institute, committed to providing essential legal resources to the law school community. For more information, visit pli.edu/law school.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia Boyko, and I am the host of PLI's How to Navigate Law School podcast. How to Navigate Law School is your podcast guide to unlocking the hidden knowledge and practical skills needed to succeed in law school. We connect students with valuable insights from experienced professionals, decompress law school's unwritten rules, and create a supportive community empowering students to confidently create their future. Hello, and welcome to the How to Navigate Law School podcast. I am your host, Anastasia Boyko, and today I am joined by Kristen Sonday, who is the co-founder and CEO of Paladin. Welcome, Kristen.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation. Pro bono was a big part of my life, so I'd love for you to take a step back and walk our audience through the mission and purpose of Paladin.
Of course. So our entire mission at Paladin is to increase access to justice by helping legal teams run more efficient pro bono programs. And prior to Paladin, even though it's really this institutional responsibility in the legal profession, the entire pro bono ecosystem was run on emails and spreadsheets and post-it notes and phone calls. And so we are the first kind of end-to-end solution that's leveraging technology to connect over 350 legal services organizations on the ground who are intaking and vetting and referring out low-income clients who need help with law students and lawyers who can help provide free pro bono work and give them the access that they really need.
Amazing. And how did you come to this work?
My background initially was with the U.S. Justice Department, and I was doing international criminal work in Mexico and Central America. And that's really where I got to see firsthand how complicated our system is to navigate and really how having an advocate with you could mean the difference between winning and losing. And in some cases, life or death. And I was one of the few Latinos on the team, and a lot of our survivors and victims were also Latino or came from underserved communities, and they just didn't have access to the same resources that other folks had. So I knew I wanted to do something to help increase access for underrepresented communities. I met my co-founder, Felicity, at this point, like a decade ago, and she was a litigator at a big firm in New York. She had done a lot of pro bono work with the UN, the International Criminal Court, and she had just come off of winning asylum for a Colombian man and his family who were being persecuted by a local guerrilla group. And she was telling me about this experience and how all of her friends wanted to do pro bono work and have a similar impact and how meaningful that experience was to her. But she said, it was so manual and laborious to find a case that was a good fit for what she was looking for. And given my background at DOJ, and after that, I joined the founding team of a tech company in New York, where I learned how to build a tech company from the ground up, we realized that we could really come together and build something that created really an infrastructure for the pro bono ecosystem in a way that hadn't been done before to help attorneys and students more readily find casework that would match their interests and the skills that they were looking to build.
That's amazing. So there is a 92% access to justice gap right now in the U.S., and I think oftentimes that's talked about in the abstract, but really it's the day-to-day pro bono opportunities that are there for lawyers to be able to help bridge that gap. And as you're talking, I think that it's important for students and new lawyers who are listening to understand the complexity of the operational challenge. I remember when I was a new lawyer, I love pro bono. I did a lot of pro bono work, but it was a bit laborious. And I was in a large national firm that had someone who was tasked with that kind of coordination. But it'd be great if you got into some sort of the details or maybe some of the horror stories of how some organizations try to organize these opportunities that are so important for the profession.
Of course. So I'll speak a little bit about the firm side and then the law school side. So traditionally, Paladin has worked with big firms, in-house corporate teams, and bars to help manage their process. And then I'll share more about our really exciting law school launch in a few. But we had pro bono counsel who were managing pro bono programs across multiple different offices in multiple different states. And traditionally, you'll have relationships with maybe a half a dozen legal services organizations on the ground who are either sending you regular email case list digests, or maybe they're picking up the phone to ask if you have someone on staff who can help with a case. And if you're managing 10 offices and have, let's say, 5 relationships per city, that's 50 organizations with whom you're trying to build and maintain relationships and manage and track all their inbound casework pretty manually. It's just not sustainable. And at the end of the day, you're spending more time on administrative work than you are on actually supervising the casework and learning more about their attorneys and their interests and the needs of the local LSOs, those legal services organizations. So through technology, we've been able to decrease that administrative overhead by about 75% and really free up that time for much higher leverage, high impact work. And that in turn has boosted engagement. For law schools, and we launched a law school version of the product last fall, and the pickup's been incredible. We launched with about 30 schools, over 22,000 students who have gone on to do, oh my goodness, over 10,000 different pro bono opportunities. Previously, their casework had also been managed manually by a local team, and it had been pretty limited to the legal services organizations in their community. Now, because of technology, we are able to aggregate pro bono casework for law students across the country in a variety of new practice areas with new causes, communities, new skill sets that students can build, and place them all into this real-time database for students to explore and sign up for opportunities that are going to be of interest. I was looking at the database last week, and we had over 500 opportunities available for students, and 60% of those were remote. And so it just creates a new way for students to gain exposure to different types of pro bono work that they might not have had before, and in turn also boost engagement in a way that we hadn't seen. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And I think many young lawyers don't fully understand the professional obligation that is required here, right, until they're beginning to register as an attorney with their state. But the bigger, I think, challenge is understanding the complex operational pieces of this, like even knowing that, yes, there might be a need, but you might not be the right lawyer for it, right? Or there might be a need right now, but you're on a paid client matter where you just don't have bandwidth, right? So just trying to juggle those pieces, I think, was a large impediment to being able to help people. And now with this remote option, yet another huge opportunity where law students and lawyers who may have been prohibited based on just the structure that they were in and what was available to them, who can now very quickly look and see, like, I would like to help with this asylum case. I do have this experience. I do have an additional language capability. How do I help someone in a different state do this, right? Like, my question is, I know you had the tech background and you had the experience at DOJ. Like, how did you begin to put those pieces together in an offering that would be able to meet those various complex administrative kinds of needs?
Great question. We literally sat down with half a dozen law firms and asked them to map out their pro bono process from beginning to end. And we found that on average, it took 52 steps from getting that inbound case to vetting it, scoping it, referring it out, going back and forth on details, opening the matter, assigning it, all the way through to closure and reporting. And we went through those 52 steps and identified, okay, which ones can we replace with technology? And then which parts of the process actually do require human judgment and human intervention? And that's where we started. And so how the platform works is that we provide a free version of the tool to legal services organizations who input their cases once, and then with a click of a button, they can send them out in real time to all the firms and schools in our network. And by creating this real-time database, we're managing a lot of the administrative work on behalf of the firms and the schools in a way that then in turn meets students and attorneys where they're at, which is online into this database. It's very easy to search, sort, filter out different types of opportunities that are available, oftentimes surfacing criteria that students and attorneys didn't even know existed or that they could search by. And then they're able to sign up for and pick up cases a lot more easily.
That's amazing. What have you learned on a skills development side? So I'll say from my perspective, what I liked about pro bono is I could learn how to lawyer and how to have
Right.
client interactions without the natural limitations of where you are in your job, right? So as a new lawyer, you're very much at the will of all of the people who are working around you, who are figuring out which assignment you're going to get, what scope of role you're going to have with the assignment. And you're oftentimes part of a really large team, especially if you're part of a large organization and a large legal team. And so let's chat about some of the insights you've gotten about the kinds of skills that new lawyers especially have been able to build through pro bono work.
What I love about pro bono is that it gives students the opportunity to develop the skills that they're going to use as a practicing attorney, but in a real world setting. And so depending on what type of opportunity they pick up, it could be anything from conducting client interviews to issue spotting to legal research or drafting. And as importantly, I think you're also learning skills that you can't learn in a classroom. So things like judgment, empathy, cultural competency, engaging with clients that are seeking challenges. And so you're learning to engage with the legal system in a way that allows you to interact with people and not just the law. And that to me is how you create really well-rounded and advanced students coming out of school.
Yeah, I think there's this paradox that happens for a lot of lawyers and when they start their careers is I feel like they have a lot of agency as they come into law school. And during the law school process, you're told how things work and what your role is in it. And when you start practicing, that's even at a higher level where you're just waiting to be given direction to because of the way that learning is structured throughout that process. And I think simultaneously, many senior attorneys want young lawyers to develop agency, but they're in a container with limited ability for agency, right? And I found that pro bono work, and we went and worked on creating will documents for indigent clients in Brooklyn when I was practicing. I found that I had full agency, right? Like I sat down with somebody and I needed to hear their story. I need to understand what their wishes were. We had to figure out how to structure a document that reflected those intentions, right? And I was responsible for the entire kit and caboodle, right?
Right.
And so it really does force you back into that agency muscle, which may have been working differently, through the law school learning and lawyer learning process where you have full responsibility. And that's that person's livelihood, rights, right? Like so much is on the line there that I think it does force you into a different learning modality and a different skill development.
Well, similar to that, in addition to creating independence, which I agree with, it also allows students to be really exploratory in how they think about the law in different practice areas, because most students come in not knowing necessarily what type of law they want to practice or which communities they want to be working with. And so they get to explore different issue areas and legal problems to solve. And that I think is really important to be exploring early on and continue to refine throughout your law school career. And then in addition to that, you're also building confidence as you go through the process and you meet with more pro bono clients and work on different types of pro bono opportunities. I mean, you're really learning to see yourself as an advocate and not just as a student. And that hands-on experience coupled with the supervision and, as you mentioned, managing the process from beginning to end just creates a more confident, I think, law student that allows you to really trust folks who are coming into firms and they know how to manage something from beginning to end without needing to hold their hand. So it's a really good point.
You underscore something that we don't talk about enough, which is like, how do I learn what I want to do as a lawyer? And we don't have a lot of those opportunities because I think we're limited by what we know and what we don't know in law school. We may not have experiential learning opportunities in our law schools to be able to do that work. When you go in as a summer associate or a junior associate, again, you're limited by what is offered to you as work and what you know and understand and what you can vocalize about what you like doing.
Right.
And as I've worked with so many lawyers across my career, I think one thing that keeps coming out for me is that you have to try it to know, right? Something in theory might seem like a lot of fun, which is how I chose some of my practice experiences. Like I like working with people, right? And I like navigating them through points of inflection, and I like tax and finance, but I don't necessarily like the kind of work that it was doing that work day to day, right? It's so important to have an idea in your head that is thoughtful and intentional around things that are important to you, but then you get into the actual day to day of it and you get to iterate. And I think in law school and early legal practice, you actually don't have much space to iterate. And so here, like, you get to learn a lot about yourself while also helping people and under the supervision of others completing legal work. But I do think there's a lot there in terms of knowing the value of what you like and what you may not like, as much as far as just like the practice of a particular practice area or a particular kind of legal work.
I love that. And one thing that I really love about Paladin is that it, for the first time, allows students to find opportunities across different practice areas, types of engagements, so litigation versus transactional, for example, research, time commitments, another one. I mean, there's so many parameters that you can use to find a case or an opportunity, and to your point, kind of try out something that would be of interest. We often hear that the two biggest barriers for folks engaging with pro bono is, number one, time. And so for the first time now, students can go on and search for pro bono that's less than 5 hours, for example, and just find something that's going to be more bite-sized that works with their schedules to get involved with. And number two, a lack of familiarity or comfort with the practice area. And pro bono provides a great way, especially as a student, because you're supervised by the legal services organization or the school, to get that hands-on experience while also being closely supervised by someone who has deep expertise. We also have training materials and webinars and other resources to help students learn more about the practice areas before they get involved with the cases. And of course, launched a partnership with PLI recently that helps train students on the different areas through videos and other types of materials to make them feel more confident. There's a common misconception with pro bono that it's going to be something as big and weighty as an asylum case, for example, that could take many years. It's very laborious and expertise intensive. And through Paladin, we've just been able to surface a lot of different types of opportunities that make students realize they can get involved in other ways, smaller, more bite-sized ways, things that are even not necessarily like litigation focused or in-person focused, that they can do more behind the scenes and really learn along with the execution of the opportunity.
I'd love to hear about the feedback that you've gotten from the legal services organizations, as well as the organizations who are helping to get out these assignments to their lawyers.
As you mentioned, the justice gap is enormous. So 92% of low-income individuals who need legal help don't get adequate help or any help at all, I should say. And the legal services organizations actually have to turn away about 50% of people who qualify because of a lack of capacity. And in my mind, our number one job at Paladin is to help increase capacity for those organizations and train volunteers, get them involved in cases so they can help serve more people and serve them well. And what I'm really excited about with respect to the law school platform and the feedback that we're hearing from the legal aid organizations is that they are just so excited to be connecting with and training and engaging the next generation of advocates who can get involved with this work and help earlier on in their careers and hopefully build and take with them a culture of pro bono, throughout their entire legal careers. And so just being able to reach new volunteers earlier on in the process, train them, and of course, with the help of technology, really accelerate how they're learning to complete these pro bono cases and actually execute on them. I think it's going to be game-changing from a volunteer perspective from the legal services organizations.
I love that. Have you noticed any nuances or challenges with AI coming on the scene, both on the law firm side as well as the legal services organization access to justice side? Like, how has it played a role in the kind of pro bono work that you're doing?
All firms right now are trying to figure out how to train junior folks in the age of AI, and there is just no substitute for real world work. And so with pro bono work, you are still learning the skills that you would learn as an associate on billable work, And you're also able to apply AI to this casework and learn how to build out that tool, the comfortability with the tools and the successful use cases with them on real work. And so we're actually seeing more professional development and talent teams incorporating pro bono into their training programs so that junior attorneys can get more experience on real work as they come into the firm and grow.
Yeah, that's a great development. I think that everyone who's been trying to get junior lawyers excited about that is probably very, very happy with that. One interesting, but when you create a technology platform that is so broad and national, like the one that you've done, I'm sure you've gotten some insights into the challenge of the access to justice gap as well as pro bono. What are some things that you've learned along the way now that you have all of this aggregate data and aggregate sort of challenges? Have there been any surprises about the ecosystem that you've gotten?
That's a great question. I mean, the need is so vast that we are just trying to keep up with kind of the supply side of cases and make sure that we're pairing them with the folks who are most readily available to help. We've seen the types of work that folks have taken on ebb and flow over time. I get asked often if we've seen any trends coming out of last year and some of the executive orders, for example, related to pro bono work. And I'm really pleased to report that the level of pro bono has stayed the same. And the types of work has changed a bit. Housing is always a really big issue area. Family law, immigration, I'd say those are really the top three. We've seen veterans work increase over the past year. But again, the need is just so great that every issue area has remained pretty high since we started. I do think that given how remote and online this work has become, it's allowed folks who have not previously gotten involved with pro bono to step up for the first time and get involved with casework that they might not have been able to access before. So that's been really great to see. And then we've also seen with AI the augment of new tools that help increase efficiency with pro bono work. So for example, we used to have in-person expungement clinics here in Chicago. And you could expunge, a dozen or so individuals' needs in a day-long clinic. Now with AI, there's one example that I really love is the Legal Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands. They actually had a paralegal build out an AI tool for them on Zapier and Gavel and Excel, I believe, and a ChatGPT plugin. And they built out a tool that allows them to ingest documents related to expungement casework. It can separate out the charges from convictions and then automatically draft petitions to clear criminal records. And they've been able to help in the same time it would have taken to help a dozen or so folks. They can help 98 people expunge over 300 criminal records. And I'm excited to see the augmentation of those types of tools and then really the democratization of those tools so that people can not only take on pro bono work more easily, but also more efficiently and more effectively so we can serve infinitely more people with the same number of lawyers as we had before.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes gets lost when we talk about the access to justice gap is all of the incredible work that's being done by legal services organizations and other local organizations. Like it is very manual at times, or it has been traditionally very manual. And part of it is just a lack of resources. Right. And so it's just fantastic to see so many developments. We had Satish Nori on last season,
He's great.
I know he was just talking about the incredible tools he's been able to build around housing law in New York, right? And so much of that is possible. And I think because you've created this amazing platform, students are able to be much more creative around those solutions, right? Many of them will see some of these inefficiencies and some of these administrative breakdowns, and I'm sure sort of work with those organizations and use their AI skills to think about automations in what has traditionally been a manual enterprise for so long.
Exactly. And that's what gets me really excited about working with law students. We're in this phase 1 now with Paladin and our law school partnerships where we're leveraging the technology to help more students get engaged with pro bono, and we're definitely seeing a big boost. And then secondarily, I am excited to work with them on building out new AI focused or just advanced technology focused tools that can help accelerate this work. And I do think that combination, especially as we continue building the culture, is going to be game changing. One other trend that I am seeing among the schools is that more schools are instituting for the first time a pro bono requirement. And I think that is also going to be really helpful in institutionalizing pro bono within the profession. And then also just getting students thinking about how they can interact with their communities in a more productive way. So we'll be partnering more with schools and kind of building out and scaling programs in a way that they previously hadn't, which is also exciting.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with some colleagues a few years back in a law school around this challenge of getting students to understand the on-the-ground needs. Oftentimes we go into law school, we have this idea about making positive change, specifically around what maybe our communities have experienced, right, as we go in. And then the process of law school is very much federal. Right? A very much federal appeals kind of focus. You come home during your first fall break and folks are asking you very plain legal questions. And of course, like you're not in a position to know the law at that point. But I do think it begins to demonstrate this gap around how we teach law school, what we teach in law school, what lawyers tend to go and do as work, and what the actual needs are on the ground. And so I love this. I love experiential learning of all sorts in law school, specifically because I think it does let students understand just how large the need is, right? And how large the gap is as far as knowing how to help, whether you're the direct person helping or whether organizations who can help, right? We as lawyers, we have 1.3 lawyers in the US, like we're a small group of navigators. And even if we might have a narrow focus, I think it's incumbent upon us as professionals in a profession, right, that is regulated to know how to guide people to those resources instead of saying, like, that's not my expertise. I don't know anybody who does that. Let me look. Maybe you look, maybe you don't, right? But like it does put you in a better position. And I think a better attitude from law school onwards to realize, hey, this is part of my job and a steward as a lawyer to know these issues and to know who might be able to help. And maybe I can volunteer my time and help in my community versus saying, well, that's not my area of expertise.
Right, exactly. And you raise a really good point about connecting with the communities, not just in terms of meeting with and helping clients, but also working with the legal aid organizations. There's so much that students can learn just by having these initial conversations, learning about the different areas that they serve, the demographics of their communities, and ways that they can help outside of pro bono, such as doing research or building technology tools that they can use. There are just so many ways to plug in. And unless you have that initial exposure, it's really hard to know how you can support. Students and attorneys have such valuable skill sets that can really change people's lives, and it just takes minimal application to do so. And so I really hope the students get excited about getting involved in one way or another because the impact that they can have is so great.
Yeah. And you mentioned bar associations. I think it's just useful to point out to students and new lawyers sort of the role of bar associations in pro bono. So I'd love like a quick overview for them from you.
Yeah, of course. So we work with almost 20 bar associations now to build out statewide pro bono portals for folks. So about 74% of lawyers are not working at big law firms or in-house corporate teams that have built out pro bono programs. And we want to make sure that those lawyers also have access to an aggregated place where they can go and find pro bono opportunities that are going to be a good fit for them to hit their 50-hour responsibility rule, build their skills, build their relationships, etc. For the legal aid organizations, and again, it's completely free for them, we want to build a place where they can share their opportunities, get increased exposure, visibility, awareness, and reach new volunteers and donors who might not have had them on their radar before. And so we really want to continue building tools to help raise awareness of the needs in the community and ways that people can fit in. The bars have been a great partner in that. A lot of them have access to justice foundations or commissions where they're thinking really critically about their constituents and residents. And to the extent that we can leverage our technology to help further that, we're really excited to do so.
It's amazing. I love it. I think that a lot of the conversation around lawyer development is around well-being and the challenges of legal practice. Like many lawyers, myself included, have often said like what a fulfilling and positive experience pro bono was for them. I would have hated being a lawyer if I didn't have my pro bono work. And I always like had the highest number of hours at my firm among my peers. So have you heard that kind of feedback yourself throughout the conversations that you're having?
Oftentimes we do hear that pro bono is like the highlight of someone's career. And it also, for students, I think it really empowers them to feel like early on in their career, they can have such a big impact in someone's life. And it also helps to put things in perspective. Because when students are going through school, which is so hard and such a grind, to meet with clients who are going through like devastating situations just really helps provide that perspective. And then knowing they can help do something about that is just the greatest feeling in the world.
I think it's a big reason why we go to law school, like I said earlier, was like to have a positive impact. And I find that the way that we train lawyers through their careers oftentimes doesn't allow for that. And so that sort of dissonance that begins to happen in law school and early law practice, I think is in many ways mitigated by pro bono opportunities for folks, because it does remind them of their objective for going to law school, their professional obligation, right? But also at the core of like, hey, we get these superhuman skills in law school, and you want to be able to use them to help people. And the current structure that we have doesn't always feel like it's helping the most people in the most impactful ways, especially, like I said, when you're in a really big department of lawyers or a big practice group, you're only seeing a small piece of the work. And so it is really hard to connect to the outcome and connect to the positive impact depending on what kind of work that you're doing and the square that you have that you're working on.
It's a great point.
Well, we're almost up on time, and I'd love to wrap us with what advice would you have for law students now that you've had the benefit of where you have worked and what you've seen around this? How would you guide them at the beginning of their careers?
Just get started. I mean, the best thing you can do is reach out to your public interest or career services center, your local legal aid organizations, hopefully through Paladin, if not offline as well. But just having that initial conversation and understanding what types of opportunities there are to get involved is so crucial to getting started. Schools often have a number of clinics where students can engage with pro bono under the supervision of professors at the university. That's another way to get involved. There are student groups on campus who are regularly putting together different events and opportunities, spring breaks, for example, where students can get that exposure. But really just having those initial conversations and understanding what's available is a great place to start in figuring out where you want to go. So I'm always happy to help there.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. This was such a valuable conversation, and I know that our audience will get a lot out of it.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to How to Navigate Law School, the podcast dedicated to guiding you through the hidden rules and practical skills essential for success in law school. For additional resources, visit PLI's Law School Hub at pli.edu/law school. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI. PLI is a nonprofit learning organization dedicated to keeping attorneys and other professionals at the forefront of knowledge and expertise.